It's time for the business news now, and Stephen Carroll is here. Morning, Stephen.
Hi, hello.
We're going to start off right here in France, and you've got some new figures on unemployment for us.
Yes, it's good news for a change, and it's particularly good news for the French government. The jobless rate for the last 3 months of 2015 fell ever so slightly to 10%, a fall of just 0.1 of a point since the previous 3 months. This is the rate for mainland France, compiled by the National Statistics Office. The monthly figures, though, for the number of people that are registered as unemployed had risen in December after a small fall being registered in November. But nonetheless, some good news for the French government there.
Take those gains where they can get them, I imagine. But this is all coming amid a debate on changes to employment law, isn't it?
Yes, and they're proving very controversial. The planned reforms would include making it easier for employers to fire workers and put a cap on compensation in unfair dismissal cases. The proposals have been enormously controversial, with opposition from unions and some within the ruling Socialist Party. Similar measures have already been adopted in Spain, though, as Clement Bonnereau now explains.
Spain's economy getting back on its feet. Growth has returned and unemployment has fallen steadily over the past few months. This hotel in central Madrid recently hired 10 people on permanent contracts.
Today, hiring people is less risky. If anything happens, we can fire them very easily. And it won't cost us much money.
Mariano Rajoy's Conservative government introduced new labour laws in 2012, making hiring and firing easier. Now, if a company loses money over 3 consecutive terms, it can fire as many workers as needed. The employee is entitled to compensation worth only 20 days of salary per year of service, down from 40 days before the reform.
We don't have a lot of stability now. We're constantly put to the test, and we must always do our best.
Back in 2012, the bill was met with fierce opposition, with mass protests being held across the country. 4 years later, the impact is being felt. According to the OECD, an extra 25,000 jobs have been created each month since 2013. However, unemployment remains high at 21%, and mass dismissals have become more common, affecting all industries from finance to transport.
I was in a job for several years, and now I'm out on the street. This reform is a disaster.
The jobless rate in Spain is still the second highest in Europe, exceeded only by Greece's.
Let's take a look at what's happening on the markets next for you. And we've seen gains on the Japanese market today. Shares there closing up 1% on the Nikkei index at the end of the trading day. Gains too on Shanghai and on the Kospi and Seoul. It's just the Hang Seng and Hong Kong showing a little bit of red today, down by 0.6%.
Let's move on to Brazil next, where a massive settlement has been reached with a mining company over an environmental disaster last November.
The company Samarco is to pay more than $5 billion over a mudslide that killed 19 people. Brazil's worst environmental disaster happened after a dam owned by the mining company breached, causing a mudslide and polluting a major river. Samarco is jointly owned by Vale and BHP Billiton. They'll pay the first billion between now and 2018 to cover the cost of the cleanup. Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff says the final figure to be paid will be decided when the extent of the damage is known.
There will be full compensation and extensive environmental repairs on offer for those affected by the disaster. And I want to emphasise there are no financial limits until it is fully repaired.
Some more of the day's business headlines for you now. French authorities have begun investigating the bank UBS for alleged witness intimidation. UBS's French arm is suspected of trying to silence a whistleblower behind allegations that the bank incited clients to open Swiss bank accounts to avoid paying tax. The spokesman for the bank has denied the latest allegations. Workers at Rolls-Royce factories in Britain have been warned by their German parent company of the risk to jobs if the UK leaves the European Union. In a letter to staff, BMW said the firm's employment base could be affected if there was a Brexit. It also said there was no guarantee the UK would be granted free trade with the rest of Europe. And the film studio Miramax have been bought by the Qatari broadcasting group beIN. Miramax, which is behind films like Pulp Fiction and The English Patient, was sold for an undisclosed sum. Its chief executive says it's looking forward to expanding its TV and film output with its new owners.
And finally, Stephen, you've got another sign of the collapse in DVD sales.
This isn't really a surprise, but the interesting part about this research is what we're calling the Netflix effect. There are new figures from the research firm IHS. It shows that DVD and Blu-ray sales fell from $22 billion a year in 2007 to under $10 billion last year. What's important about 2007? Well, it's when Netflix first launched. There's been a similar drop in the UK since Netflix arrived there, and with the streaming service now available in 190 countries, IHS is expecting to see a big impact too in Australia and Japan, which remain two of the world's biggest markets for DVD sales. I still occasionally buy DVDs.
You'll be one of the few then.
But I am one of the few. But apparently rentals is a big factor in this as well, because these figures also count how much it costs to rent them. And as we know, renting a DVD much more difficult now than it used to be.
It certainly is. Gosh, if I could find somewhere to rent a DVD, exactly rent one online there. But anyway, thanks very much for that. Stephen Carroll taking us through the business stories.